My name is David Madison, the 29th of February 2020. I'm an ex-clergy atheist, and I have collected, the title count right now is 383 titles, books that have been written explaining in detail the falsification of theism, Christianity especially. I call this the Cure for Christianity Library, in homage to Mark Twain's famous comment that the best cure for Christianity is reading the Bible. Please tell your Christian friends they have a lot of homework to do. They haven't noticed. Just type Cure for Christianity Library into Google. These authors have stated a lot of blunt truths, hence this series of videos, Cure for Christianity Knockout Quotes. This is quote number 18. There Was No Jesus, There Is No God is the title of a 2013 book by Raphael Lataster. Now, rather than freaking out about the title, it's a good idea to read the book and try to engage in the serious issues that he raises. Here's one of Lataster's important statements, quote, "Given that Paul's knowledge of Jesus comes from the Old Testament and his direct channel to the divine, rather than first-hand eyewitness accounts, he can certainly be written off as a reliable and primary source of evidence for Jesus' historicity. Paul may have met people who were very close to Jesus, such as James and Peter, but never claims them as sources," unquote. New Testament scholars have always been stumped that the Apostle Paul, in all of his letters, never talks about the life of Jesus, his deeds, his miracles, his parables, his teaching. How can that be? The Gospels were written much later, of course, so Paul didn't have them to look stuff up in about Jesus. But he even brags about not checking things out with the original disciples. This is literally what he says in Galatians chapter 1, verse 11. "For I want you to know, brothers, that the gospel that was proclaimed by me is not of human origin. For I did not receive it from a human source, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ." Paul was pretty sure about those revelations from Jesus, his visions. Well, we would call them hallucinations. And that's what Lataster is referring to, his direct channel to the divine. But cult leaders have always claimed that they've been having conversations with gods. Why do people ever accept this? In Galatians 1, Paul also says that he once spent 15 days with Peter in Jerusalem, yet he claims that his knowledge of the gospel didn't come from any human source. We do have to wonder, what the hell did they talk about for 15 days? Paul was so big on the resurrection, you'd have thought he would want to spread the word about the empty tomb. Wouldn't Peter have told him about that? Well, hint. At the time Paul wrote, the story of the empty tomb hadn't been invented yet, so he couldn't have heard it from Peter anyway. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John give different conflicting accounts of the empty tomb. It's pretty clear that that story grew with the telling. Paul didn't get his ideas about Jesus from the disciples, and he was sure the story of Jesus is embedded in the Old Testament. That's where he got much of his so-called information about Jesus. Another hint, nowhere does the Old Testament explicitly predict Jesus. From the very beginning, Christians have made that mistake. So scholars are frustrated that Paul, the earliest guy to write about Jesus, didn't have any actual stories about Jesus to tell. Hence, Lataster says in this knockout quote that Paul can be written off as a reliable and primary source of evidence for Jesus' historicity. Since the Gospels are certainly not reliable and primary sources, that's really bad news.